Ambassador Thomas Washington had been under Secret Service protection for 6 months due to credible threats against his life, but he'd never been treated like a threat by his own security detail. When Agent Roberts blocked his path to the embassy, Thomas realized his protection had become his problem.
Don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and a comment before we start to learn more about what happened.
Ambassador Thomas Washington adjusted his cufflinks as he stepped out of his armored sedan outside the United States Embassy in downtown Washington, D.C. At 51, Thomas carried himself with the quiet dignity that came from representing America's interests on the global stage for over 2 decades, most recently as ambassador to Nigeria before his appointment to a special diplomatic position handling African affairs. The morning's schedule was particularly demanding, with back-to-back meetings with foreign dignitaries, State Department officials, and intelligence briefers. Thomas was scheduled to lead a critical discussion about American diplomatic strategy in West Africa, a region where his expertise had proven invaluable to 3 different presidential administrations. For the past 6 months, Thomas had been under Secret Service protection due to credible threats against his life stemming from his work exposing corruption in international aid distribution. The threats had originated from several sources, including foreign nationals angry about his anti-corruption initiatives and domestic extremists who opposed his progressive foreign policy positions. The protection detail had been professional and discreet, led by Agent Sarah Chen, a 15-year Secret Service veteran who understood the delicate balance between security and allowing Thomas to perform his diplomatic duties effectively. However, Agent Chen was on medical leave following a training injury, and the detail had been supplemented with temporary agents, unfamiliar with Thomas's routines and clearances. Agent Michael Roberts had been assigned to the temporary protection detail just 3 days earlier. At 28, Roberts was an ambitious agent with 4 years of Secret Service experience, primarily in counterfeiting and financial crimes before his recent transfer to protective services. He had received the basic briefing about the principal he was protecting, but the transition had been rushed, and he had not yet been fully integrated into the security protocols. Roberts took his protective responsibilities seriously, perhaps too seriously according to some of his colleagues. He believed that effective protection required treating everyone as a potential threat until proven otherwise, an approach that sometimes created unnecessary tensions with the people he was supposed to be protecting. As Thomas approached the embassy's main entrance, Roberts immediately noticed him and began his threat assessment. The agent observed Thomas's expensive suit, his confident demeanor, and his approach to the secure facility. However, Roberts had never been properly introduced to Thomas and had only seen a brief written description rather than attending a face-to-face briefing. "Excuse me, sir," Roberts called out, stepping into Thomas's path. "This is a restricted area. I need to see your identification and security clearance." Thomas paused, somewhat surprised by the challenge. He was accustomed to being recognized by his security detail, and the embassy staff had been expecting his arrival for today's high-level meetings. "Good morning, Agent Roberts," Thomas said pleasantly, reading the name tag. "I'm Ambassador Washington. I'm scheduled for the 9 o'clock intelligence briefing." Roberts looked skeptical. "Ambassador Washington, I'm not familiar with you. Are you sure you have the right location?" Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Agent Roberts, I've been working out of this embassy for 6 months. I think I know where my office is located." "Your office?" Roberts's suspicion deepened. "Sir, I'm going to need to see official identification and verify your clearance through proper channels." Thomas reached for his diplomatic credentials, but Roberts immediately became more defensive. "Slowly, sir. Keep your hands visible." "Agent Roberts," Thomas said calmly, "I believe there's been some miscommunication. I'm the principal you've been assigned to protect. I'm Ambassador Thomas Washington." Roberts stared at him blankly. The principal I'm protecting is Ambassador Washington, and you don't match the description I was given." "What description were you given?" Thomas asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Male, approximately 50 years old, diplomatic background," Roberts recited. "But the briefing didn't mention that he was—" Roberts trailed off, realizing he was about to say something inappropriate. "Didn't mention that he was black?" Thomas finished quietly. Roberts's face reddened. "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to," Thomas replied. "Agent Roberts, I'm going to show you my diplomatic credentials now. Please don't reach for your weapon." Thomas slowly produced his official State Department identification, his diplomatic passport, and his embassy access cards. Roberts examined each document with obvious skepticism, as if he were checking for forgeries. "These look official," Roberts admitted reluctantly, "but I've never seen you before. How do I know you didn't steal these credentials?" Thomas felt his patience beginning to wear thin. "Agent Roberts, you've been on my protection detail for 3 days. The fact that you don't recognize the person you're supposed to be protecting suggests a serious breakdown in security protocols." "I know who I'm supposed to be protecting," Roberts insisted. "And frankly, you don't look like someone who would be a United States ambassador." The comment hung in the air between them, its implications clear to both men. Thomas understood exactly what Roberts meant, even if the agent might not have consciously realized the bias behind his words. "Agent Roberts, what exactly does a United States ambassador look like?" Thomas asked quietly. Roberts shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't mean it like that. I just meant, well, you're not what I expected." "Based on what criteria?" Thomas pressed. "Look, sir, I'm just trying to do my job," Roberts backtracked. "Security protocols require me to verify everyone's identity, even if they claim to be the principal." "Agent Roberts, security protocols also require you to know who you're protecting," Thomas pointed out. "The fact that you're challenging my identity suggests you weren't properly briefed on this assignment." Roberts bristled at what he perceived as criticism. "I was briefed. I know Ambassador Washington is attending meetings today about African diplomatic initiatives." "What else do you know about Ambassador Washington?" Thomas asked. Roberts consulted a small notepad. "Former ambassador to Nigeria, expert in West African affairs, currently under protection due to threats related to anti-corruption work." "That's correct," Thomas confirmed. "What else?" "That's all I was told," Roberts admitted. Thomas pulled out his cell phone. "Agent Roberts, I'm going to call the Secret Service duty officer to clarify this situation." Roberts immediately became more aggressive. "Sir, you cannot make phone calls in a secure area without authorization." "I'm authorizing myself," Thomas said firmly. "As the principal under protection, I have the right to contact my security coordinator." "Not until I verify your identity," Roberts insisted. Thomas speed-dialed a number and put the phone on speaker. After 2 rings, a voice answered. "Secret Service Operations, Agent Kim speaking." "Agent Kim, this is Ambassador Washington. I'm outside the embassy with Agent Roberts, who is questioning my identity and refusing to allow me access to my own workplace." "Ambassador Washington," Agent Kim's voice carried surprise. "Sir, Agent Roberts should have been briefed on your identity. Is he not recognizing you?" Roberts' face went pale as he heard his own agency's operations center confirming Thomas's identity. "Agent Roberts," Agent Kim continued over the speaker, "Ambassador Washington is your principal. He should have unlimited access to the embassy, and you should be facilitating his security, not impeding it." Roberts stared at the phone, then at Thomas, then back at the phone. "Agent Kim, I was told to verify everyone's identity. The briefing I received didn't include a photograph or detailed description." "Agent Roberts, You were supposed to receive a complete briefing package, including photographs and recognition protocols. Report to the duty supervisor immediately after your shift for retraining. Thomas ended the call and looked at Roberts. Agent Roberts, do you understand what just happened? Roberts nodded slowly, the reality of his mistake beginning to sink in. I made an error in judgment. You made more than an error, Thomas said. You profiled me based on your assumptions about who could hold a diplomatic position. When I told you I was Ambassador Washington, you didn't believe me because I didn't fit your mental image of what an ambassador should look like. Sir, I was just following security protocols, Roberts protested weakly. No, you weren't, Thomas replied firmly. Security protocols require you to know who you're protecting. They don't require you to question the identity of the principal based on racial stereotypes. Roberts looked down at his shoes. Ambassador Washington, I apologize. I didn't mean to. I wasn't trying to. Agent Roberts, what you were trying to do doesn't matter as much as what you actually did, Thomas said. You treated me like a threat instead of recognizing me as the person you're paid to protect. Do you understand the implications of that failure? Roberts shook his head. It means that while you were focused on me as a supposed threat, any actual threats could have approached undetected, Thomas explained. Your bias didn't just insult me, it compromised my security. At that moment, Agent Chen's temporary replacement, Agent Patricia Moore, approached the embassy entrance. Moore immediately recognized Thomas and understood that something had gone wrong. Ambassador Washington, Moore said respectfully, I apologize for any delay. Is everything all right? Agent Moore, Agent Roberts has been questioning my identity and refusing to allow me access to the embassy, Thomas explained. Moore's expression grew serious as she looked at Roberts. Agent Roberts, Ambassador Washington is our principal. You should have recognized him immediately. I didn't receive proper briefing materials, Roberts said defensively. You received the same materials we all did, Moore replied. The briefing packet included photographs and detailed recognition protocols. Thomas realized that Roberts's failure wasn't just about inadequate briefing. It was about his own assumptions overriding the information he had been given. Agent Roberts, Thomas said, I want you to think about something. When you saw a black man approaching this embassy, what was your first instinct? Roberts considered the question carefully. I thought you might be a potential threat. And when I told you I was Ambassador Washington, what was your first reaction? I didn't believe you, Roberts admitted quietly. Why? Roberts was quiet for a long moment. Because you didn't look like what I expected an ambassador to look like. And what did you expect an ambassador to look like? Roberts couldn't answer because the honest answer would expose the racial bias that had driven his actions. Thomas nodded. Agent Roberts, you've just learned an important lesson about how assumptions can compromise security. The threats against my life are real, and they come from people who want to harm American diplomatic interests. While you were treating me like a suspect, you weren't scanning for actual threats. Agent Moore stepped forward. Ambassador Washington, Agent Roberts will be removed from your detail immediately and will undergo additional training before returning to protective duties. Agent Moore, I appreciate that, Thomas said, but I also want Agent Roberts to understand that this isn't just about policy violations. This is about the fundamental principle that American diplomats serve all Americans, regardless of race, and they deserve protection that's based on professional competence, not personal prejudices. Roberts looked up at Thomas. Ambassador Washington, I want to apologize. I realize now that I let my assumptions interfere with my professional judgment. Agent Roberts, recognition is the first step toward improvement, Thomas replied. The question is what you do with this learning opportunity. Thomas finally entered the embassy, 40 minutes late for his intelligence briefing. The delay had caused a cascade of scheduling problems, but more importantly, it had exposed serious flaws in Secret Service training and protocols. 2 weeks later, the Secret Service implemented new training requirements for all protective agents, including mandatory bias recognition courses and detailed briefings on the principles they were assigned to protect. Agent Roberts completed the additional training and was eventually reassigned to a different detail where his performance improved significantly. Ambassador Washington continued his diplomatic work, knowing that his protection detail now truly understood their mission to protect him so he could represent America's interests abroad, regardless of whether his appearance matched their expectations of what power looks like. Because in American diplomacy, security shouldn't depend on whether the person being protected fits an agent's stereotypes about who deserves protection.